Dawn came softly to Dry Creek Ranch, filtering through the broken window panes of the little kitchen with a muted glow. Jacob Ransom stood at the stovetop, the cast-iron coffee pot hissing its last breath, and took a moment to breathe in the early morning air. His shoulders tensed and released, as though bracing himself against unseen memories. The ranch lay quiet behind him, the barn, sagging though still proud, the windmill slowly creaking in the breeze, the fences stretching out like silent sentinels. Guarding a wounded piece of earth dot inside, Morale sat at the small wooden table, one hand cradling a tin mug of steaming coffee, the other resting on the rough-grained surface, fingering a knot in the wood. She watched Jacob with an intensity, born of both curiosity and caution. 5 days under his roof had taught her that he spoke little, yet every word mattered when it emerged. He poured coffee into a chipped enamel bowl and slid it across the table to her. "It's hot," he said, voice gravelly yet not unkind. Mireille nodded, lifting the bowl to her lips and sipping. The strong, smoky bitterness filled her senses, and she let out a small, satisfied sigh. Jacob turned to the stove, retrieving a plate of reheated beans and a thick slice of cornbread, placing it before her. Steam rose in lazy swirls. She swallowed. "Thank you." He inclined his head then, paused. His dark eyes, normally shadowed by the brim of his hat, flicked toward the window as if he heard something beyond the ranch yard. Silence reasserted itself. By mid-morning, chores beckoned. Jacob retrieved a leather satchel from beneath the bed. Mireille rose, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She expected him to give her another set of orders, but instead, he handed her a length of coarse rope. "Gutter rope," he remarked. "We'll need it for the spring gates." She blinked. "I'm not a ranch hand." Jacob regarded her for a long second, expression unreadable. Then he shrugged. "Maybe you'll learn." So she learned. Side by side, they made their way to the fields. The grass was tall and brittle, the earth cracked. Spring had come late, and the ranch's lifeblood well was low. Jacob climbed up to adjust the gate hinge while Mireille fed the mar. Her hands trembled at first, unused to the animal's strength, but as she whispered gently into its ear, the mare nuzzled her fingers. Jacob glanced over and offered a tiny, rare smile like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Not bad," he said, voice low. Mireille felt heat rise to her cheeks. She finished her task and moved to steady the gate. The morning sun climbed faster. Now and sweat dampened her hair. Jacob finished tightening the hinge, then stepped back. "That'll hold," he said. She exhaled, wiping her brow. "I did that." He fixed her with a steady gaze. "We did that." They worked another hour, hauling feed for the chickens, mending a fence post with fresh plank, hauling water from the well. Every so often, Jacob watched her as though committing each of her movements to memory. Mireille worked steadily, surprised at how much her arms ached and how alive she felt. By midday, both of them were breathing hard, but neither made a complaint. Inside for lunch, they shared a pot of stew that Jacob had simmered since dawn. Mireille stirred in salt and dried herbs, something she had foraged from the ridge. The rich aroma filled the kitchen as they ate without speaking. Outside, crows cawed in the yard, and the wind rustled through the half-bloomed wildflowers dot at the edge of the table. Jacob rested. His eyes were distant. "What happened?" Mireille asked softly. "To your wife?" He stiffened, fork frozen in midair. She regretted the question at once. "It's all old dust," he said, turning his gaze to the window. "Then let it stay there," she urged gently. "Let it be dust." He shook his head, slow as the turning windmill. She was too good to stay. Her heart trembled at his sorrow, at the quiet weight of loss that hung between them. She placed a hand on his wrist. "People stay when they want to," she said. Jacob looked at her, really looked. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, yes, but also a glimmer of hope. He nodded once, and that was enough. when the sun dipped. Low in the sky, Jacob saddled the mare. Dust curled along the ranch road as they set out for the ridgeline, where the old mine collapsed years ago. The canyon walls glowed golden in the late light. Jacob walked beside the mare, Mireille perched lightly in the saddle. They passed tumbleweeds and weathered stones dot at the rim of the ravine. They stopped. Below, the dry creek wound through scrub and boulders. Jacob leaned on the fence rail. He pointed down to a cluster of rocks. Legend says a prospector found silver here once. Spent a fortune digging, never found a speck. Folks say he went mad. Mireille's eyes tracked his finger to the jagged outcrop. Maybe he dug in the wrong place. He looked at her with a half smile. Maybe. They stayed until twilight crept over the canyon. The sky bled purple and rose. As darkness settled, Jacob spoke for the first time in hours. "You'll like it here," he said. Mireille inhaled the night air, cold and crisp. She felt something within stir, a sense of belonging she'd never known. "I think I will," she answered. Back at the ranch, they found the windmill had stalled for lack of water. Jacob tightened his cap, then climbed up to test the bearings. Mireille fetched a lantern. She watched him alight from the platform with a grin. "Old thing just needs a good push," he observed. They worked together, hand to hand, until the mill groaned back to life and water trickled into the trough below. They stood in silence, listening to the gentle gurgle. Mireille reached out and touched Jacob's hand. "We did it," she whispered. He nodded and for the first time let a laugh escape, a soft, relieved sound that echoed in the cool evening air. Night fell. They sat on the porch, 2 cups of tea warming their palms. Mireille glanced at Jacob. "Will you tell me your wife's name?" He stared into the darkness for a long while, then exhaled. "Anna." "Anna," she repeated. "Beautiful name." Silence stretched between them, gentle and unforced. Then, from somewhere deep in the shadows, came the low rumble of hooves. 2 riders approached, cloaked in dust and dusk. Jacob's hand twitched toward his holster. "Who are they?" "Mireille," asked. Jacob rose, eyes narrowing as the figures drew near. "Town folk on patrol, probably checking the ridge." The riders swung off their horses, guns slung low. Their leader tugged off a black bandana, revealing a scar that ran from temple to jaw. "Ransom?" the scarred man asked. Jacob stepped forward. "I'm Jacob Ransom." The man nodded slowly. "We got word of a woman at your place." Jacob tensed. "She's under my protection." The man's eyes flicked to Mireille, seated in the porch swing. "Jed Holloway's men sent us." Mireille's heart skipped. Jacob smiled thinly. "They can come themselves," he said. The man glanced at his companion. Then, with a resigned sigh, he sheathed his pistol. "Ain't worth trouble with you." He and his partner spurred their horses and rode away. As they disappeared into the night, Jacob exhaled. The tension in his shoulders released. Mireille looked at him. "They won't bother us again." Jacob studied the dark horizon. "They might." Lightning flashed over the ridge, fracturing the sky in silver lines. In that brief illumination, Mireille saw Jacob's face harden, a shadow passing over his eyes. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. She gripped his arm. "We're safe here, right?" He met her gaze, voice low and certain. "For now." And beyond the barn, somewhere in the gathering storm, a lone wolf howled. End of chapter, but the darkness has only begun to stir. Up next, the storm gathers on Dry Creek Ranch, and ghosts from the past come calling. Stay tuned, this isn't over yet. Click subscribe to follow every turn of Dirt and Destiny. The storm arrived with a scream. Wind tore through Dry Creek Ranch before the first drops even fell, howling through the gullies and hollering over the ridge like a thing alive. The windmill shrieked, its blades straining against the sudden fury. Jacob Ransom stood on the porch, one hand braced against the wooden post, the other gripping the edge of his coat as lightning arced across the sky. In the distance, Thunder rolled like cannon fire from an old war. Inside the house, Mireille moved. Quickly, collecting loose dishes, shuttering windows, securing anything not nailed down. The old house groaned as if it remembered storms worse than this. She glanced at Jacob through the window, his silhouette motionless against the elements. Unshaken by the wind or the rising dark, he finally came inside when the rain started. Soaked to the bone, boots tracking mud across the wooden floor. Mireille met him with a towel. "Why'd you stand out there like a fence post?" she asked. Jacob took the towel and rubbed at his neck and face. "Storms talk, you just gotta know how to listen." She raised an eyebrow. "And what's this one saying?" He met her gaze, eyes shadowed. "Something's coming." She almost said it already did. The storm battered the house until past midnight, but the next morning dawned deceptively clear. Blue skies stretched over the scrubland, and puddles sparkled in every rut. The barn still stood, though its roof had peeled back along one edge. Jacob set to work early, climbing onto the ladder with a hammer and a roll of tar paper. Mireille insisted on helping. They spent hours pounding nails into stubborn wood, wind still tugging at their sleeves like a child trying to interrupt. Later, over breakfast, Jacob finally said it aloud, "They'll come back." Mireille, pouring coffee, didn't flinch. "Yet's men?" Jacob nodded. "Or Jed himself. That wasn't a visit. That was a warning." She set the kettle down. "Then we warn back." He looked up. Her jaw was set, her eyes clear and defiant. "You don't owe me this," he said. "No," she replied. "But maybe I owe it to myself." They rode into town 2 days later. Not together, but close. Mireille rode the mare, Jacob led. The townsfolk watched from behind curtains or leaned against posts with guarded expressions. Duster Creek wasn't a place for grand gestures or shouted arguments. But everyone knew a confrontation was inevitable. They dismounted in front of the general store. Inside, the bell rang as they entered. Jed Holloway turned from the counter. Well, didn't expect to see you two," he said, eyes lingering on Mireille. Jacob stepped between them. "You sent men to my ranch," Jed smirked. "Just checking on damaged goods. Heard you had a thing for strays." Mireille stepped forward. "Say that again. I want to see if your teeth rattle when they hit the floor." Jed blinked. Jacob placed a calm hand on her arm. "We're not here to fight." Jed leaned back against a barrel. "Then why come?" "To tell you to stop," Jacob said. "Whatever you're planning, don't." Yet's smile vanished. "You think you can come in here with your ghost wife and play hero? You're not the man you used to be, Ransom." "I know," Jacob said. "I'm better." The two men stared at each other. Time stretched. Then Jed spoke again, low and dark. "She's not yours." Jacob's voice matched his. "She's not yours either." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Mireille hesitated, then looked at Jed. "You don't own people," she said. "No matter what paper you hide behind." She left. The bell chimed again. Outside, Jacob helped her into the saddle. "That made things worse," she said. He nodded. "Maybe, but it also made things clear." That night, Jacob dug up a wooden box from beneath the floorboards of the barn. Mireille found him sitting with it open, guns laid out like memories on velvet cloth. "You going somewhere?" she asked. "No," he said. "Just thinking about who I used to be." She knelt beside him, and he picked up a 6-shooter, spun the chamber, then set it down. He was fast, but tired. Always tired. "And now?" Jacob looked at her. "Now I'm slower, but I've got something worth protecting." She nodded, understanding. "I should tell you," she said, "about where I came from." He waited. "I was married once. Briefly. He wasn't a kind man. The kind who thought papers meant ownership. When he died, I thought I was free." Jacob didn't interrupt. Then came the contract. The mail order ad. I thought it was a way out. It was another prison. Her voice wavered, but she didn't cry. I'm not broken, she said. But I'm not whole either. Jacob looked at her. No one is. Not out here. They sat in silence. Then he reached over and closed the lid on the guns. Let's build something better, he said. She smiled. Let's. A week passed. No sign of Jed. No riders. Just wind, work, and silence. Jacob built a new chicken coop. Mireille painted the fence posts. Together they turned soil in North Plot, planting beans, carrots, and wild onions. At night, they sat by the fire and talked, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. Then came the letter, delivered by a boy on a pony, no return address. Just Jacob's name. Inside, a single line. Ink scrawled fast and angry. She be mine or no one's. Jacob burned the letter in the stove. We'll be ready, he said. Mireille didn't argue. They loaded rifles, secured windows, posted wire at the edges of the property. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Jacob taught her to shoot. She hit a tin can at 20 paces. Not bad, he said. Better than not bad, she replied. He smiled. They came at dusk. 4 riders. Dust curled behind them as they approached the ranch, slow and deliberate. Jacob stood on the porch, rifle cradled in his arms. Mireille crouched inside, behind the window, shotgun loaded. Jed led. He dismounted first, boots crunching gravel. Jacob, he called. No need for guns. You brought yours, Jacob replied. Jed chuckled. Fair. Let's talk. Talk from there. Jed nodded to his men. They spread out, one toward the barn, one toward the well. One hung back. You think you're safe? Jed called. This is frontier land, no sheriff coming for miles. I don't need a sheriff, Jacob said. Then what? Jacob leveled. The rifle. Just one good reason. Jed looked up. She belongs with me. She doesn't belong to one. You going to die for her? Jacob didn't answer. Mireille stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand. He won't die, she said. But you might. Jed froze. His eyes met hers. She stepped beside Jacob. This is your last warning, she said. Jed looked at his men. None moved. He cursed. You'll regret this. No, Jacob said. You will. Jed mounted his horse. His men followed. No shots fired. Just dust. That night, Jacob sat by the fire carving wood. Mireille handed him tea. You think he's gone for good? Jacob shrugged. Men like him don't forget losing. But they do remember fear. She nodded. They drank in silence. Then she said it. I'm staying. He looked up. I didn't ask, he said. I know, she replied. But I want you to know. I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because I choose to be. Jacob's throat tightened. He set down the carving, took her hand. I'm glad, he whispered. The fire cracked. The storm. At last it passed. Outside, Dry Creek Ranch breathed. Fences stood, chickens roosted, and 2 people sat inside a house not broken, not perfect, but whole enough. Enough to start again. Enough to heal. Enough to love. And somewhere, over the ridge, Jed Holloway rode into the dark, chasing a shadow he would never catch. End of part 3, but peace is rarely permanent in the West. The next part will test everything Jacob and Mireille have rebuilt. To follow what comes next, subscribe. Trouble doesn't knock, it rides in. The first frost arrived early. One morning, Jacob Ransom stepped outside to find a sheen of silver clinging to the fence rails, glittering in the slanted morning light. The sky was clear, the wind sharp. Winter was coming fast, cutting short a fall that barely had time to ripen. He flexed his stiff hands, breath misting, and turned toward the barn. Inside, Mireille was already moving. She had risen earlier than him for 3 days straight ever since the last dust-up with Jed Holloway, though their nights had returned. To calm, there was a tension in the way she moved. as though expecting the past to burst through the door at any moment. Jacob recognized it. He had worn it himself for years. He found her splitting kindling, her braid tucked into her coat collar, the axe biting rhythmically into the log. "You should rest," he said. "I'll rest when I know we'll be warm." She replied without looking up. Jacob picked up a bundle of firewood and stacked it beside the others. "We're ahead of where we were last year." Mireille wiped sweat from her brow. "Still behind where we need to be," he nodded. She was right. The winter stores were modest. The crops had been poor from the dry spring and the fence along. The northern border had collapsed under last week's gusts. Still, they had each other. And Jacob had come to realize how much that meant. Inside the house, they worked together, preserving the last of the root vegetables, sewing new quilts, oiling the hinges. Jacob repaired the old stove while Mireille boiled jars for canning. Neither said it aloud, but they both knew another visit from Jed wouldn't come with warnings. It would come with fire. It was on the second week of frost that word arrived. An old rancher named Boone rode in with news. Jed Holloway had left town, packed up and gone east toward Cheyenne. Some said he'd been hired by a mining company. Others whispered he was running from something or someone. Mireille didn't celebrate. She merely nodded, eyes narrowed. "He's not gone," she said. "He's waiting." Jacob wanted to reassure her. But he couldn't, because part of him agreed. With Holloway's absence, things began to change in Duster Creek. The general store reopened regular hours. The preacher's wife organized a town supper. Even the sheriff, Tom Wexler, ventured out of his office to make small talk by the well. When Jacob and Mireille rode in for supplies, they were greeted differently. Nods, smiles, a pie handed over. By the schoolteacher. One man slapped Jacob's shoulder and said, "'Bout time someone stood up to that bastard." Still, Jacob remained cautious. He'd seen peace before. And he knew how easily it shattered. At the mercantile, they found more than just beans and nails. They found a girl, 16, maybe 17. Dirt-smudged face, boots too big, eyes too old. "Name's Wren," she told Mireille. When Jacob asked if she had family, "None left," Wren said. "Not since the fire." Mireille saw something in the girl herself, perhaps, or something worse. "She comes with us," she told Jacob. He didn't argue. Wren settled into the spare room. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it was with a blunt, dry wit that caught them both off guard. She took to chores easily, stitching feed bags, herding chickens, mending boots. Mireille taught her to cook. Jacob taught her to shoot. "She's fast," he said one day, watching the girl hit 5 cans in a row. "She's scared," Mireille replied. They both knew it was the same thing. Winter pressed harder. By mid-November, snow coated the hills like dusted flour. The stove burned day and night. They took turns checking the livestock. When the Mare gave birth early, all 3 of them took shifts to keep the foal alive. It was during one such shift, Mireille dozing near the barn, that the dogs began to bark. Jacob was on his feet instantly. Outside, the snow had turned to slush. Hoof prints led to the edge of the property, 3 riders. He didn't recognize the horses, but he recognized the posture. Gunslingers. Not yet hostile. Not yet. Mireille joined him with Wren at her side. "Visitors? Maybe," Jacob said. "Or vultures." He waited by the fence. The lead rider stopped 20 feet out. He wore a duster too clean for a trail man. His mustache was waxed. His eyes were pale and mean. "Jacob Ransom?" Jacob nodded. The man touched his brim. "Name's Rudd. I work for Mr. Holloway." Mireille stiffened. "He's in Cheyenne," Rudd continued, expanding his interests. "But he wanted to be sure you hadn't forgotten the past." Jacob kept his face unreadable. "What's your message?" Rudd smiled. "Just that the past don't stay buried. And neither do promises." He turned his horse. "Wait," Jacob said. Rudd glanced back. "Tell Jed something for me," Jacob said. "I'm listening." Jacob's voice was ice. "If he sends another man to my ranch, he better be sure it's a man he's willing to bury." Rudd's smile widened. "Oh, I'll tell him. That's the fun part." They rode off. Wren whispered, "That was a warning." Jacob nodded. "And a mistake." They doubled their watch. Fences reinforced. Firearms cleaned. Every night, one of them stayed. Awake by the window, the snow kept falling. One night, Wren found Mireille pacing the hallway. "Can't sleep?" Wren asked. Mireille shook her head. "Too quiet." "I know what you mean," the girl said. "Silence makes monsters louder." Mireille studied her. "You're not a monster." "Not yet," Wren whispered. Mireille embraced her. "You never will be." On the eve of the winter solstice, the sky went dark early. Clouds like bruises rolled over the ridge. Jacob felt the shift before the storm broke. The horses wouldn't settle. The hens wouldn't roost. He lit every lantern in the house. Then he checked his gun. Mireille joined him in the kitchen. "You think tonight's the night?" Jacob nodded. "It feels like it." Wren stood by the window. Riders, 4 of them. Maybe 5. Jacob took position by the front door. "Same side as last time." "Coming from the ridge," Wren said. Mireille loaded her shotgun. "Let's welcome them." They didn't talk about fear. They didn't need to. The wind howled. As the riders drew close, Jacob stepped outside. "Stay behind me," he said to Mireille. She ignored him and stood beside him anyway. 5 riders dismounted. All wore black coats. One held a torch. Jacob raised his voice. "You've got 10 seconds to leave." The torch was raised higher. "Jed sends his regards." Then the man threw the torch right onto the barn. Flames leapt. Mireille fired first. The man with the torch dropped. The others scattered. Gunfire erupted. Jacob dropped one assailant with a chest shot. Wren picked off another from the window. The last 2 fled. The barn burned. Bright against the snow. Jacob ran to cut the foal loose. Mireille and Wren worked buckets until the fire was out. Ash fell like black snow. In the silence afterward, Jacob stood by the ruins. Mireille joined him. "We won," she said. "No," Jacob whispered. "Not yet." He looked toward the east, toward Cheyenne. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. No return address. A single line, "If you want peace, come get it." Jacob folded the letter. Then he packed his bag. Mireille stood in the doorway. "You're going?" He nodded. "I'm coming with you." He didn't argue, and neither did Wren. End of part 4. And now the fight leaves the ranch and heads into enemy territory. In part 5, they ride into Cheyenne, where justice waits with a crooked grin. The story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The train into Cheyenne came in slow through a hard wind, the wheels grinding against icy tracks, whistle howling across snow-covered plains. Inside the last passenger car, Jacob Ransom sat rigid by the window, his coat collar turned up, fingers resting loosely near the pistol strapped to his thigh. Mireille sat beside him, arms folded, hat pulled low over her face, as if she could hide from the town that waited. Across from them, Wren slouched with her boots propped on an empty crate, hands stuffed into a coat 3 sizes too big. "City smells like soot," Wren muttered, nose wrinkling. Jacob didn't answer. He was already listening to the scrape of boots down the aisle, to the creak of metal in the ceiling above, to the too quiet silence outside the window. As the train pulled into the Cheyenne station, he saw men in long coats and wide-brimmed hats waiting on the platform. 3 of them, watching, not moving. One of them lit a match but never touched it to anything. Mireille followed his gaze. "Friends? Scouts," he said. "Watching for someone. Us?" He nodded. "Probably." When the train hissed to a stop, Jacob moved first. They exited through the baggage car. rifles slung beneath thick coats, moving fast along the edge of the platform until they disappeared into the narrow alleys between warehouses. Cheyenne had changed. More buildings, more smoke, more men with tired eyes and fast hands. Jacob led them to a boarding house run by a widow named Edna Langley. She didn't ask questions when she opened the door, just ushered them inside, pointing toward the back room with fresh quilts and a kettle already heating. "I figured trouble would chase you here," Edna said. "Same as always," Jacob nodded. "Appreciate the shelter." Muriel stepped forward. "We'll pay." Edna smiled faintly. "Didn't say I wanted money." "Then what?" Edna glanced toward the window. "Some quiet justice." Jacob's jaw clenched. "Working on it." That night, Jacob met with an old contact, a man named Caleb Drury, who used to ride with the territorial marshals, but now kept mostly to himself and a bottle of rye. Heard Holloway set up shop out past the river bend. Drury said, wiping a trickle of liquor from his chin. Mining company gave him muscle and a badge. Private law. What kind of muscle? Jacob asked. Drury leaned back. Hired guns. Not locals. Mean ones. They call the lead man Cutter. Used to scalp men in Texas for laughs. Muriel's face darkened. We'll need names, numbers. Drury looked at her. Lady, what you need is to run the other direction. Jacob stood. Names. Drury sighed, reached into a drawer, and handed over a folder. Just remember, he said, justice in Cheyenne doesn't ride a white horse. It crawls like a snake and bites just the same. The next 2 days were a blur of reconnaissance. Wren staked out the mining offices, watching who came and went. Muriel slipped into the company saloon, pretending to be a traveler looking for work. She returned with a list of faces, schedules, and exits. Jacob met with an old blacksmith who still owed him a favor. By the third night, they knew where Jed Holloway would be and when. He plays poker Thursdays, Wren reported, eyes gleaming. Upstairs in the Red Canary, midnight, Jacob nodded. That's where it ends. Muriel looked at him. We walk in guns blazing? No, Jacob said. We walk in calm, make him see what's coming. The Red Canary sat at the edge of Bricktown, its windows fogged with pipe smoke and heat, music drifting from the saloon floor. Upstairs, velvet wallpaper peeled at the corners and cigar ash coated every table. Jed Holloway sat at the head of a poker table, sleeves rolled, eyes glazed from drink. Around him sat Cutter, a giant of a man with skin like tanned hide, and 2 others young, tense, fingers twitching near their holsters. When the door opened and Jacob stepped in, the room fell silent. Holloway blinked. Ransom, he said, laughing. I should have known you'd come creeping. Muriel followed, shotgun cradled in her arms. Wren came last, silent as a shadow. You burned my barn, Jacob said. You took my property, Holloway replied. She was never yours. Jed stood slowly, eyes bloodshot. This ain't Dry Creek. You're in my town now. Jacob placed a folded paper on the table. Eviction notice, he said. Signed by the Federal Land Office. Your mining contract violates territorial boundaries. I had it reviewed. Jed blinked. You lying? No, Muriel said. He's just thorough. Cutter stood, flexing massive hands. We gonna talk paper or trade lead? Jacob turned to him. You fire a shot in this town, you'll never leave it. Cutter smirked. You think I'm scared? No, Jacob said. But he is. He nodded to the corner, where a boy barely out of his teens stood trembling. The boy's hand twitched toward his pistol. Muriel raised her shotgun. Try it, she whispered. Jed looked at Cutter, then at Jacob, then at Wren. You think you can scare me out of Cheyenne? No. Jacob said, we came to tell you something, then we'll leave. Yet's mouth twisted. What message? You come near us again me, heard the girl or Dry Creek. Jacob leaned forward, voice low. You'll vanish, like you never were. Jed looked at Mirail. This what you want? This life of fear? Mirail smiled coldly. No. That's what we left behind. Jacob turned to go. You can't threaten me, Jed called after them. This is my town. Jacob looked back once. Not anymore. The next morning, word spread that Cutter left town. 2 of Yet's men vanished by train. The mining contract was pulled by the governor's office. And Jed Holloway was seen drinking alone on the hotel porch, a letter in his hand, his pistol laid across his lap. He didn't fire it. 3 days later, the train pulled out of Cheyenne. Jacob, Mirail, and Wren rode in silence. As the planes rolled by. Mirail leaned into Jacob. You didn't kill him, she said. No, Jacob said. I let him live with it. She nodded. That's worse. They returned to Dry Creek in time to see the first spring thaw. The barn, though charred, still stood. The soil was soft. Life waited beneath the frost. They rebuilt slowly. Together. Wren helped Jacob plant the new beans. Mirail stitched curtains for the windows. At night, they sat by the fire. And when Jacob finally placed the old 6-shooter into the box and buried it beneath the barn again, no one said a word. They didn't need to, because peace, once earned, need not be shouted. It just needs to be lived. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The spring came late but generous. The melt from the northern mountains filled the Dry Creek beds with fresh water, snaking through the pasture like silver veins. Jacob Ransom stood knee-deep in the muddy trench where he was laying pipe from the new well to the vegetable patch. Behind him, Wren tossed another length of tin down the embankment, while Mirail watched from the porch, sipping from a dented enamel cup, one hand resting casually on her hip. The piece it held. And peace, Jacob realized, was not a thing won and then kept. It was something tilled daily, like the land. Something coaxed out of hard soil with patience and calloused hands. It had been 3 months since they'd returned from Cheyenne. 3 months of slow, honest work. The barn was rebuilt stronger, lower, better vented. The fields had sprouted green from seed. Chickens were laying again, and Wren had taken to riding out to the north fence line every morning to inspect for gaps. Jacob climbed out of the trench and wiped sweat from his brow. We'll need to reinforce the west side, he called to Ward. Mirail, heavy rains coming in the next few days. She nodded. Already cut the new boards. Just need you to stop pretending you're still 30. Wren snorted. Jacob raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. His back was already protesting. That night, thunder rolled far off in the distance as they sat around the kitchen table. Wren carved lines into a map. Jacob had drawn fence repairs, areas where coyotes had broken through, the root cellars' new drainage points. Mirail stirred stew in a cast iron pot while reading from a tattered book of recipes she never followed. Salt? She asked. Jacob looked up. Already in, Wren sniffed. Needs pepper. Everything needs pepper to you, Jacob replied. Not the pie, she said. That just needed cinnamon. Mirail raised an eyebrow. I still say you dumped half the jar in. It was an accident. It peeled the roof of my mouth. They laughed. The kind of laughter that left warmth behind. Then came the knock at the door. It was gentle. 3 taps. Not hurried. Not loud, but it was wrong. Everyone in Dry Creek knew to call out first. Jacob stood immediately, gun belt already in hand. Mirail grabbed the shotgun from behind the coat rack. Wren eased toward the back hallway, rifle raised, her stance steady. Jacob opened the door slowly. An old man stood there, gaunt, dressed in a frayed Union Army coat. His beard was gray and wild, eyes sunk deep into his face. I'm looking for Jacob Ransom, he rasped. You found him, the old man exhaled. Then, I reckon I'm finally home, Jacob squinted. Do I know you? You did, the man said. Before the war. That stopped Jacob cold. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Mirail and Wren watched through the curtain. You were with the 19th? Jacob asked. The old man nodded. Hiram Clegg, you used to carry my ammo box. Jacob's face twisted. You died at Cedar Hill, almost, the man said. Took 3 bullets and a bayonet. Crawled out with the mules. Been drifting ever since. Jacob stared at him. What are you doing here? Clegg's hands trembled. I'm tired, Jake, and I heard you built something out here. Heard maybe it was a place a man could rest. Jacob didn't answer for a long time. Then he opened the door. Come in. Clegg stayed in the barn loft the first week. He ate little, slept less, and rarely spoke. But he helped where he could, hauling wood, mending broken hinges, digging compost. Trenches without complaint. He's not right, Wren said one night. Mirail stirred tea leaves. No, but he's not wrong either. Jacob sat near the stove. He saved my life once. Took a shot meant for me. Then what? Wren asked. Jacob's gaze turned inward. Then I thought he died. Wren looked toward the barn. He's hiding something. Mirail glanced at Jacob. You think he's dangerous? Jacob sighed. I think he's broken, same as I was. 2 weeks later, the horses spooked. Wren found them the next morning. Wide-eyed, sweat-drenched, circling the far paddock, tracks. Let in from the south, unshod horses, boot prints in pairs. 3 sets. They never came to the house, just circled. Then left. Jacob studied the prints. They were watching. Why not attack? Mirail asked. He shook his head. That wasn't the point. Then what was? Wren crouched beside one print. They wanted us to know. That night, Clegg finally spoke. They're looking. For me. The 3 of them turned to him. He sat near the stove, hat in his lap, eyes dim. Who? Jacob asked. Black Hollow boys. Mirail frowned. Sounds made up. It was a real place, Clegg said. Black Hollow, Kentucky. Hollow in name, hollow in soul. Wren leaned forward. What did you do to them? Lived. He said. He told them everything. After the war, he'd ridden with a group of former soldiers, escorting settlers west. In Kansas, they took work guarding a silver shipment. The Black Hollow gang ambushed them, killed most, took the silver, left. Clegg bleeding in a ditch. He'd survived. Then hunted them, one by one. I got all but 3, he said. Those 3 never stopped looking. Jacob rubbed his jaw. And now they found you, Clegg nodded. But they'll burn this place to ash before they touch me. Jacob stood. We've defended this ranch before. We'll do it again. No, Clegg said. I'll ride out at dawn, draw them away. Mirail slammed her cup down. That's not how this works. Wren crossed her arms. You brought them here. You don't get to run. Clegg looked at Jacob. You want me gone? Jacob didn't speak for a long time. Then, you ride, I ride with you. At dawn, the 4 of them saddled up. Clegg led, head low, hat shadowing his face. They found the 3 men camped beneath a broken mesa, fire burning low, rifles at their sides. No sentry. Overconfident. Jacob flanked wide. Wren climbed to higher ground. Mirail stayed behind a rock, eyes on the horses. Clegg rode straight in. The men looked up, startled. Well, I'll be, one said. Hiram Clegg, you ornery bastard. Ben. A long time, Clegg said. The man stood, brushing dirt from his coat. Thought we killed you. You missed. The second man grinned. We can fix that. They drew. Clegg dove sideways. Jacob fired, dropping the second man. Wren's shot cracked from above, catching the third before he could mount. The first man ran. Mirail cut him off, pistol drawn. Don't. He froze. Jacob rode up, tied the man's hands, and disarmed him. Clegg stood over the bodies. You. Going to kill him? Wren asked, nodding to the survivor. Clegg looked tired. No, let him ride. Let him tell every ghost still breathing that some of us don't die easy. They watched the man ride off. Then they turned for home. Back at the ranch, the air was cleaner. The wind lighter. Clegg stayed another week, then packed his bag. You sure? Jacob asked. I owe you peace, he said. But I can't stay. I'm a man made of ghosts. Muriel hugged him. Don't be a stranger. Wren shook his hand. Don't get dead. He smiled, then he rode away. That night Jacob sat on the porch, polishing his boots. Muriel brought tea. Wren played with the dog, an old stray they'd adopted last winter. Think that's the end of it? Muriel asked. Jacob nodded. For now. Wren leaned back in the rocker. Then, we better enjoy it. They did. Because peace, once earned, must be savored. And though trouble always rode the horizon, tonight it stayed beyond the hills. Tonight, Dry Creek slept. And so did its ghosts. End of part 6. Next time, an unexpected letter forces Muriel to confront a chapter she thought was closed forever. To keep writing with us, hit subscribe. Some stories only get better the deeper they go. Summer arrived in Dry Creek with a fury. The wind changed, first coming hot out of the south, dry and sharp like breath across a forge. Then came the flies, thick as smoke, clinging to fence posts and windowsills. And then the sun burning down without mercy, baking the earth into hard pan, blistering every leaf and blistering the backs of anyone who dared stay out too long. The chickens stopped laying. The cows kicked at their stalls. Even the dog preferred the shade under the old wagon to the porch. But the worst thing about that summer wasn't the sun. It was the letter. Muriel found it wedged beneath the barn door, wrapped in oilskin to keep out dust. No return name, no wax seal. Just her name, written in thin, careful script. Muriel Dumas. Jacob was up in the loft with Wren, mending the last hay net when she walked in holding it. This was under the door, she said, her voice too even. Jacob looked down from the rafters, eyes narrowing. You recognize the hand? Muriel nodded once. I do. Wren glanced between them. From before? Muriel nodded again. Want to read it first? Jacob asked. She already was. The first words knocked the air out of her. I know what you did. The letter continued, neat and unsparing. You think moving west makes you safe. You think marrying a stranger and hiding behind a fence makes you new. But debts don't die just because the ground changes. I lost everything because of you. I want it back. There was no signature. But Muriel already knew who had written it. That night, she sat alone on the porch, the letter folded neatly in her lap. Jacob came out just before the oil lamp inside sputtered dry. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, hands clasped, staring out into the stars. After a long silence, she said, his name was Sebastian. He was my brother. Jacob didn't move. Muriel stared at the horizon, voice low. We were born in New Orleans. Third-generation Creole. Our parents died when we were teenagers. Fever, same week. He was older, took over everything. The debts, the land, the anger. She folded the letter again. He made deals with men who trafficked in everything. People, property, letters of indenture. Bought and sold like cattle, I found out. I leaked names to the papers. Names that brought those men down. Jacob's voice was quiet. You brought justice. I ruined him, she said. He said I destroyed our bloodline. Is he dangerous? She laughed softly, bitterly. He doesn't need to be. He's rich, and men like him don't use guns. They use messengers. Jacob leaned forward. He say what he wants? Everything, she whispered. He wants it all back. The next week brought no visitors, no more letters. But the feeling lingered like a snake curled just out of sight, too patient to strike yet, but not gone. Wren noticed it first. Someone's watching the North Ridge, she said over breakfast. Jacob looked up. You sure? Twice now, Wren said. Same glint, same time. Muriel pushed her chair back. We can ride up, check it. No, Jacob said. Let's wait. Give them time to get comfortable. On the fourth day, Jacob left the house at dawn, rifle slung, riding silent up the far rise. It took him most of an hour to loop behind the ridge and approach from the east, crawling low through sagebrush and dead grass. He found the watcher easily, a young man no older than 20, dressed in city clothes too clean for the prairie. He sat cross-legged behind a scope, the glass pointed straight at Dry Creek Ranch. Jacob raised the rifle. "You move, you die." The man jumped, hands in the air. Jacob stepped closer. "Name?" "Etienne," the man stammered. "Etienne Dumas." Jacob froze. "You Mireille's brother?" "No," Etienne said. "Her nephew." Jacob brought him back, wrists tied. Mireille stood on the porch, arms folded. She looked at the boy with unreadable eyes. "He sent you," she said. Etienne looked ashamed. "He told me you were alone, that you needed rescuing." "I'm not the one lost," she replied. "He said you stole family secrets. That you married into violence." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "That's ironic." Ren kept her rifle trained on the boy. Etienne looked at Mireille. "I just wanted to see you." She softened, slightly. "You were 12 last time I saw you." He nodded. "You gave me a red ribbon. Said it meant I was free." Tears threatened his eyes. "I didn't know," he whispered. Mireille approached him. "Do you know now?" "Yes." "Then go back," she said. "Tell him he can't reach me anymore. And if he tries—" Jacob finished for her. "He'll find we're not the kind of family he wants to visit." Etienne left the next morning, but the storm didn single quotes T.2 weeks later, a courier brought papers, legal ones. Claims against the property. Disputed land rights. Old deeds refiled in New Orleans, traced to Mireille's maiden name. "This is war," Jacob said. Mireille agreed. "But not with bullets." She rode to town the next day. Ren and Jacob waited on the porch until sunset. When she returned, she carried a satchel full of letters. "What is it?" Ren asked. Mireille smiled grimly. "Answers." They spent the next 3 nights writing affidavits, notarizing records, copying land surveys, and mailing packets to judges and clerks across 2 territories. "Paper cuts worse than lead," Jacob muttered. Weeks passed. Then, a reply. A judge's order. Disqualifying Sebastien Dumas's claims. Denying his legal reach across the border. The letter closed with one final line. "Sometimes the past must be buried where it belongs. Yours is buried deep enough." That night, Mireille finally unpacked the trunk at the foot of the bed. Inside, an old photo of her parents, a lace shawl, and the red ribbon she'd once given a 12-year-old boy. She tied it around the post of the bed. "What's that for?" Jacob asked. "A reminder," she said. "Of what?" "That I'm free and I'm never going back." Jacob kissed her shoulder. "Then neither am I." Outside, Dry Creek rustled in the summer wind. The moon rose over the hill, casting silver over the grass. Ren sat watch on the porch, rifle across her lap, dog at her feet. She looked back at the door, at the house still lit from inside, and smiled. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. End of part 7. In the next chapter, a sudden illness forces Jacob to confront his greatest vulnerability. Not death, but being needed. If you're still with us, subscribe. The ranch may be strong, but hearts are tender, and storms come from within too. The heat wave broke in early August, not with rain, but with a sharp, clean wind from the northwest, and skies so blue they made the barn roof look dull. The drought left behind brittle grass and dust that settled in the throat, but it also made way for something rarer in Dry Creek, stillness. And that's when Jacob Ransom fell ill. It began small, barely noticeable. A hesitation in his step, a missed nail in the fence line. He waved it off, called it age or heat or just a bad morning. But then came the cough. Dry, hacking, like something stuck deep in his chest and unwilling to leave. Mireille heard it. First, She said nothing. Then came the chills. By the third day, Jacob couldn't finish a full morning's work without leaning against the stable wall, pale and shaking. Wren noticed when he dropped a feed bag halfway to the trough. "You all right?" she asked, brows drawn. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. "Sure you are," she muttered and bolted for the house. He didn't fight when they made him lie down. That scared Mireille more than the cough. Dr. Emery came from town. A thin man with a worn hat and a bag of rattling bottles. "Pneumonia," he said after listening to Jacob's lungs. "Deep in the left one. Probably been festering for weeks." Mireille's voice was tight. "What do we do?" "Keep him warm, liquids, broth, and whatever this is." Emery pulled out a brown vial. 2 drops every 12 hours. "Will he get better?" Wren asked from the hallway. Emery looked at her. "I've seen men twice his age bounce back. I've seen stronger ones fade in days. Depends on what he's holding on to." The days blurred. Jacob drifted in and out. Fever dreams wrapped around him like old blankets, tight and suffocating. Sometimes he spoke half-coherent words, names no one recognized, years no one remembered. Mireille rarely left the room. She sat by the bed with a damp cloth, whispering the same things over and over. "You're safe. You're here. I'm not going anywhere." Wren took over the ranch. She woke before dawn, checked the west fence, milked the goats, split the firewood, tended the horses. Mireille tried to help, but Wren stopped her. "You stay with him," she said. "We all know this place runs because of you. I'll keep the dust off it till he's better." Jacob's fever broke on the 7th day. The first clear thing he said was her name. "Mireille." She blinked. "Yes?" His lips cracked. "Water." She wept as she held the cup to his mouth. That night, for the first time in days, he slept without shaking. By the 2nd week, he sat up. "I feel like I lost a brawl with a church bell," he said. Mireille laughed, wiped her eyes. "You look worse," Wren added from the doorway. "Still got my aim," he warned, reaching for the imaginary rifle by the door. "Then prove it," Wren challenged. "You shoot a pinnacone off the fence post. I'll believe you're back." Mireille held up a hand. "You leave that pinnacone alone. He's not going anywhere yet." It took another week before Jacob walked to the barn on his own. Mireille trailed beside him, close enough to catch him if he staggered. "I hate being useless," he said, breath short. "You're not," she replied. "You're healing. I can't protect you like this." She stopped. "You think that's what this is?" He looked at her, exhausted eyes full of guilt. "I thought I was the shield," he said. "But I wasn't ready to be the reason." Someone else picked one up. Mireille reached for his hand. "Jacob Ransom, you arrogant mule. We don't survive because of you. We survive because of us." He let out a quiet breath. "I've never needed anyone." "Well," she said, eyes shining, "you do now." That night, as the moon rose, Wren knocked once on the doorframe. "I fixed the upper gate," she said. "And I had a thought." Mireille looked up from the knitting she pretended to know how to do. "What kind of thought?" "We're always reacting," Wren said. "Waiting for letters, for men with guns, for legal papers or past ghosts. What if we stopped waiting?" Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You thinking of hiring a marshal?" "No," Wren said. "I'm thinking we start building." She unrolled a paper, an old blueprint from the town archives. "A school," she said. "1 room. For the kids from neighboring farms. There's 5 ranches east of here with children." I asked around. Mireille stared at her. "We're not just a place people hide," Wren said. "We could be a place people come to." Jacob smiled. "I've got no lungs and she wants to raise a generation." Mireille walked over, placed a hand on Wren's shoulder. "I think it's a beautiful idea." The next month passed in a flurry. Jacob, still weak but stubborn, oversaw the timber cuts. Mireille wrote letters to the town council. Wren rode to each. Nearby farm, gathering promises out by the first cool wind of autumn. The foundation was set. The first student arrived early. A girl named Nora, with boots 2 sizes too big and a book strapped to her chest out by week's end. There were 7. Muriel took the mornings. She taught letters and numbers. Wren taught afternoons, rope work, writing, tools. Jacob built the desks. Himself. And for the first time, Dry Creek Ranch was not just a home. It was a beginning. One night, Jacob stood at the fence line, watching the school lights flicker inside the new cabin. Muriel joined him. "You scared?" she asked, terrified. He said, "Of what?" He thought, "That I'll be remembered as the man who built a home and almost let it die because he didn't know how to rest." She slid her arm around his waist. "Then let's make sure that's not your ending." He kissed her forehead. "Deal." And behind them, the school bell rang for the first time. End of part 8. In the next chapter, a storm brings not rain but fire, and with it, a choice no one's ready to make. Subscribe to keep writing with us. The wind never rests in Dry Creek, and neither do the hearts brave enough to call it home. Jacob's hands were soaked in blood. Muriel lay against him on the scorched dirt outside the school cabin, her dress torn at the shoulder where the bullet had grazed deep. It hadn't gone through clean. It had torn muscle and left shards behind, but she was alive. Breathing shallow, eyes half-lidded, pulse fluttering like a spooked bird. Wren crouched beside them, pressing gauze to the wound. "We have to get her inside," she said. Jacob's jaw was clenched so tight he couldn't speak. He lifted Muriel gently, cradling her like he had in that first stormy ride to Dry Creek months ago. She groaned softly, but her hand found his. Shirt and gripped it weakly. Inside the house, Wren cleared the table, scattering maps and tools. Jacob laid Muriel down, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Stay with me," he murmured. Her lips curled faintly. "Wasn't planning to leave." Wren boiled water while Jacob cleaned the wound, tearing linen into strips. Muriel bit down on a leather strap and nodded. She didn't flinch when he dug out the shards of splintered lead with trembling fingers. "You've done this before," Wren whispered. Jacob didn't answer. He remembered too well the field tents. Outside Shiloh, the screams of boys who should have been home learning to read. The taste of whiskey poured over torn flesh. The look of someone trying not to die. That night, as Muriel slept under watchful eyes, Jacob walked to the edge of the pasture. The fire had burned out. The shooter was gone, but the echo of the rifle crack still rang in his bones. He stared into the blackness. "I'm done waiting," he said aloud, and the prairie wind carried his promise. The next morning, Jacob rode into town. He wore his cleanest shirt, his old boots, and the coat that had rested under his bed for 2 years. He tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and walked in without knocking. Sheriff Ellis was half asleep behind the desk, boots on the table, chewing tobacco slowly. "Jacob," he said without opening his eyes. "Something on fire?" Jacob laid a blood-stained cloth on the desk. Ellis sat up. "She's alive," Jacob said, "but not untouched." The sheriff examined the cloth, silent. Jacob leaned in. "I want names." "I can't." "You can, and you will," Ellis sighed. "You think I don't want to help? But that's rangeland. No clear jurisdiction. Whoever's doing this had a scoped rifle, fired from timberline. That takes money, a name, a trail." Ellis hesitated. Then he stood, opened the cabinet behind him, and pulled out a thick folder. "This was supposed to be filed away, but something told me not to." He handed it over. "This man, Burke Delroy, hired gun, ex-Pinkerton, does work for Eastern clients looking to resolve disputes discreetly." "Who's the client?" "Can't say for sure," Ellis replied. "But he landed in Cheyenne 2 weeks ago. Traveled under a false name, of Durant." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Durant's the name tied to those land claims Muriel fought." "Off," Ellis nodded. Likely alias. He's paid through shell companies, third-party wires. But Burke's real. He leaves a trail of silence. Jacob rolled the folder up and tucked it inside his coat. If I don't come back, tell Wren what happened. Ellis shook his head. Don't go alone. Jacob paused. I'm not. When he returned to Dry Creek, Wren was already saddling the horses. I'm coming, she said before he could speak. I figured. She's awake. Told me not to let you go without a brain. Jacob smiled thinly. I'll borrow yours. They left at dawn. The ride to Cheyenne took 2 days. They rode hard, sleeping in turns, eating jerky and drinking river water. On the second evening, they reached the city's edge brick streets. Telegraph poles, smoke curling from saloons. Jacob dismounted outside the Central Hotel, where Burke Delroy was rumored to stay. The building rose like a fortress of stained glass and smug quiet. Back door, Wren said. I'll find the roof. Watch your 6. Jacob nodded. 2 hours. If I'm not out, come in fast. He stepped through the doors like a ghost walking. Through memory. Burke Delroy sat in the bar, wearing a pinstriped vest and a wolf smile. His eyes scanned the crowd like he was bored of it all, but when Jacob approached, he blinked once. Mr. Ransom, he said. Jacob didn't sit. You shot my wife, he said. Delroy sipped his drink. I tried to scare her. The bullet drifted. Jacob's fists tightened. Delroy set the glass down. She stuck her nose in things long buried. Your ranch is sitting on faulted paper original surveys that contradict new ones. She fixed those. Not for my client. Jacob leaned in. Tell your client he has one chance to back off, or I bury every legal trick he's got under 6 feet of frontier dust. Delroy smirked. You can't scare men who own half of New Orleans. I'm not trying to scare them. Jacob's voice turned cold. I'm coming for them. Delroy's smile faded. You'd start a war over her? Jacob's eyes burned. She's the war worth having. Delroy reached for his coat. Then I guess we're done here. Almost, Jacob said. He reached down and smashed the glass of water across Delroy's hand, just enough to distract. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Delroy by the collar and slammed his face into the polished bar. Patron screamed. A gun came up, but Wren's shot rang first, a warning shot perfectly placed. The chandelier above Delroy exploded in sparks. Glass rained. The room scattered. Jacob leaned down. Stay out of Dry Creek, or next time you'll be dust on my boots. He walked out as the law ran in. They rode through the night. Back at Dry Creek, Mireille waited on the porch. She stood when they returned, her bandaged arm shaking, but her smile unwavering. You kept your promise, she whispered as Jacob dismounted. He reached for her. I'll keep making new ones, every day. They held each other as the dawn light touched the blackened fields. Smoke still hung low. The air smelled like ash, and Hope. Wren stood at the edge of the porch, her hat low. Think they'll come again? Maybe, Jacob said. Mireille nodded. Let them, Wren grinned. We'll be ready. And behind them, the school bell rang, alive. End of Part 10. Part 11 brings a stranger with a name from Jacob's past and a map that might change Dry Creek's fate forever. Subscribe if you haven't already. The ranch isn't done testing them yet, and family? That word's about to grow deeper than blood. The school bell rang 3 times that morning. By the 3rd ring, Jacob knew something was wrong. He stepped out of the barn, wiping sawdust from his hands, and looked up the path toward the school cabin. The bell was still swinging, though. The children weren't outside. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. The wind carried the scent of chalk and bread, and something else metallic, dry. Wren jogged from the field, rifle slung. Didn't sound like recess. No, Jacob said. Something else. They moved quickly, boots crunching the path. Mireille stepping out of the main house as they passed. Stay back, Jacob told her. Morale, despite the fresh scar across her shoulder, simply narrowed her eyes. No, he didn't argue. They reached the cabin and found a stranger seated calmly at the teacher's desk. He was middle-aged, maybe 40, dressed in tan dusters and fine boots, coat dusty but tailored. His hat rested on the desk beside him, revealing cropped gray blonde hair. His face was lined but sharp, eyes pale and calculating. He looked like a man who didn't blink easily. The children sat in silence on the benches, eyes wide. Nora clutched her book like a shield. Jacob stepped forward. "You have 5 seconds to explain why you're in my schoolhouse." The man stood. "Slowly, name's Isaac Ransom." Jacob froze. Morale's hand found his. Isaac nodded. Didn't expect that to land so hard. Ren looked between them. "Your kin?" Jacob's voice was flat. "Older brother." They cleared the children out. Ren walked them to the orchard, promising extra lunch and extra recess. Morale stood by the door, arms folded. Jacob leaned against the wall. Isaac remained calm. "I heard about the fire," he began. "Didn't know she'd been shot." "Not sure how you heard anything," Jacob said. "Thought you were dead." Isaac's grin was thin. "Nearly was. Mexico, 1872. You remember the Hartley job?" Jacob nodded once, barely. "You?" "Stayed. I ran, took 5 bullets south of Juarez. A nun saved me, then a coyote stole my boots." Morale blinked. "Excuse me?" "Long story," Isaac said. "Short version, I spent the last 6 years wandering, staying off maps. Then I heard someone tried to burn your ranch." Jacob crossed his arms. "And you came here." "Why?" Isaac reached into his coat. Jacob tensed, but the man only pulled out a scroll. "Because the map they used to challenge your land titles. It's based on one I stole 20 years ago." Around the kitchen table, Isaac spread the parchment. It was brittle, yellowed, and marked with dozens of hand-drawn line surveyor notations, signatures, and an original seal from the Continental Railroad Commission. "This shows the border drift," he said, pointing. "The old homestead lines. Turns out, Dry Creek sits on what was considered neutral Grant territory during the split." Jacob studied it. "That was before Wyoming was even a state." "Exactly," Isaac said. "But some men like the ones gunning for you claim the newer maps override the original ones. I disagree." Morale leaned in. "And the courts?" "They'll listen," Isaac said. "Especially if the man defending it has family testimony." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "You mean you?" Isaac nodded. "I'm offering to swear under oath that this map was stolen and altered by the same men backing the claims against your ranch." Ren narrowed her eyes. "Why help now?" Isaac looked at Jacob. "Because I walked away once, and I heard you stayed. You built this. She double quotes." He nodded toward Morale. Fought for it. I don't want to die with that regret on my chest." That night, Jacob and Morale sat under the stars. "He lied before," Jacob said. "About money, about law. Left me holding the bag more than once." Morale laced her fingers through his. "But this time, he's telling the truth," Jacob said. "I feel it." "Then let him fight for you now." Jacob nodded. The next day, they rode to Cheyenne. Isaac testified before a federal clerk, laying out the theft of the original documents, the falsified survey trails, and the network of fraudulent grant claims. With Isaac's statement, Morale's legal filings, and Jacob's sworn affidavits, they filed a motion to permanently bar further ownership disputes against Dry Creek. It would take months to finalize. But for the first time, they weren't just reacting, they were claiming. Isaac stayed a week. He fixed a wagon axle, taught the children poker tricks, and played fiddle on the porch till midnight. Ren watched him carefully, arms folded but smiling more than she admitted. One morning, as Jacob saddled the horses, Isaac approached. "Thought I might stay," he said. Jacob turned. "You?" "Only for the winter," Isaac added. Then, maybe longer, Jacob studied him. You willing to work for it? Isaac's eyes twinkled. Only thing I've got left, Jacob nodded. Then welcome home. Mireille watched from the kitchen window, her heart full. This place had been forged from loss, fire, and stubborn hope. Now it was growing, branching like an old oak, finally finding room to stretch. End of part 11. Next, a child goes missing. In the Canyonlands, and Dry Creek rides together for its most dangerous search yet. Subscribe and stay with us, because in the West, family isn't always who you're born to. It's who rides beside you when the sun sets red. The wind came down from the north that morning like a whisper through canyon bones, cool, dry, and carrying news. Mireille heard it first. She was hanging linens when a sharp breath of air curled around the porch, raising the hair on her arms. Something was off. The ranch had a rhythm, and today it was broken. The chickens were restless, the horses nickered too much, and the dog-old, half-deaf Jeb sat staring down the east trail, ears perked. Then Wren came running. Mama Carter's boys missing. Jacob was already at the corral, tossing a saddle on the gelding. Isaac swung up beside him, lasso looped across his back. Mireille handed Wren her canteen without a word and tied her apron off. They rode as a unit. Within minutes, Mireille, Jacob, Wren, Isaac, and 2 ranch hands toward the Canyonlands east of Dry Creek. The Carter homestead sat on a low bluff, tucked between rock and cedar, one of the first neighbors to believe in Mireille's school. Mama Carter, gray-haired and straight-backed, stood outside her porch with a hand pressed to her mouth and eyes wide with panic. "Daniel," she said, her voice cracking. "He went to look for arrowheads by the stream. Said he'd be back by lunch." "What time did he leave?" Jacob asked. "Sunup. Alone?" "He wouldn't let his sister come. Said he wanted to find one all by himself." Jacob studied the horizon. "Canyon Forks 3 miles east. We'll split up." "I'm going," Mama Carter said firmly. "You stay here," Mireille said. "If he doubles back, he'll come to you first." The mother hesitated, then nodded. The Canyonland east of Dry Creek was no place for a child. Ragged limestone ridges, sudden sinkholes, rust-red soil that turned slick under the wrong boots. Jacob rode point, following the trail Daniel might have taken, searching for signs, broken brush, boot prints, disturbed dust. They found a set of tracks by the stream. "Small," Wren said, crouching. "Fresh." Isaac stepped beside her, scanning the trees. "Goes east, toward Split Rock. That's a hunting path," Jacob muttered. "Cougars have been sighted there." They rode hard. The heat rose by mid-morning. The canyon sucked water from their mouths and gave nothing back but dust and echoes. Mireille kept scanning the ridge lines, calling Daniel's name every few hundred yards. No answer. Then, just past midday, they found the scarf. It was wedged beneath a root, torn at one corner and damp from dew. Wren held it up. It had the initials, DC, embroidered in faded thread. Mireille's fingers trembled as she touched it. "He was here," she said. "And he didn't go willingly." Jacob's face darkened. "Cougar?" Isaac asked. Jacob shook his head. "No blood. No drag marks. This was dropped in a hurry. Or torn off." Wren added. They pressed on. The sun was dipping low when they heard it. A whistle. Thin, broken, barely audible, but Mireille heard it. She spun her horse, spurred hard toward the ridge. They followed, crashing through the underbrush, past dry ravines and dust-choked trees. At the base of Split Rock, they found him. Daniel Carter, 8 years old, scratched, bruised, and pinned beneath a fallen log. His leg was bent at an unnatural angle, his face streaked with tears and grit. Looked up as they dismounted. "Miss Mireille," he whimpered. She was already at his side. "It's all right, Daniel. We've got you." Jacob examined the log. "Too heavy to lift clean. We cut it. Don't move me." Daniel cried. "You'll be fine," Mireille whispered. "You're brave." "You're safe." Wren brought the hatchet. Isaac stabilized the log. Jacob carved a wedge under the trunk. Together, they pried and cut and grunted until the dead wood groaned and gave way. Daniel screamed once as they eased him free, then passed out. Muriel caught his head. They worked quickly, wrapping his leg, easing him into Jacob's arms. Wren fashioned a sling to hold him steady in the saddle. By the time they returned to the Carter homestead, the sun had sunk beyond the hills. Mama Carter wept into her son's hair. "You brought him back," she whispered. Muriel smiled gently. "We don't leave our own out there." That night, back at Dry Creek, the mood was somber. They'd found Daniel, but the danger rattled them. Jacob stood by the barn, watching the stars. Isaac joined him. "You think he was alone the whole time?" Jacob didn't answer. Isaac continued. The scarf was torn. He heard something out there. Jacob finally spoke. There were 2 sets of tracks near the stream, one smaller, one heavier. But the second one vanished. "You think someone was following him?" "I think someone wanted us out there." "Away from the ranch." Isaac stiffened. "We left Muriel unguarded." Jacob took off running. They found the door open. The kitchen lamp still swung from its hook. Muriel sat at the table, pale but unharmed. In her lap was a bundle oiled cloth, wrapped tight. "What happened?" Jacob asked. She looked up. "Someone came to the door, said he was from the land office. Wanted to deliver a message. And I told him to wait. Then I shot the vase next to his head." Isaac whistled. "Nice grouping." 3 inches left," she said. Jacob wrapped her in his arms. "He left this," she added, holding out the cloth bundle. Inside was a letter, unsigned. "You can win the law, but you won't win the land. The ground remembers who it belongs to." Wren read it aloud. "Sounds like a warning," Jacob nodded. "Or a challenge." Muriel's eyes were fierce. "Then they picked the wrong family." The next day, they fortified the ranch. Extra planks went over windows. Rotations were assigned for watch. Neighbors offered men and supplies. The school paused. The ranch became a stronghold, and Daniel Carter, leg in a splint, sat proudly in a rocking chair by the window, telling every visitor how Muriel had saved him from a cougar the size of a wagon. Jacob didn't correct him, because in a way, she had. End of part 12. Next, Dry Creek faces its first winter since the fire, and the snow brings a trap too perfect to ignore. Subscribe to keep riding with us. The wind may howl, but this ranch stands firm for love, for land, and for the one still learning how to fight. The first snow came early. By the end of October, Dry Creek was blanketed in white. The fields lay hidden beneath powder, the trees brittle with frost, and the sky hung low and silent like it was holding its breath. Jacob Ransom stood at the barn gate, snow crunching beneath his boots. He watched the sky, remembering winters past, quiet ones, bloody ones spent alone. But this winter was different. The fire hadn't broken them. The threats hadn't scattered them. If anything, the ranch was stronger now. Inside, Wren tightened the hinges on the school cabin. Isaac stacked the last cords of wood. Muriel baked biscuits by the dozens, preparing for the possibility of being snowed in. Yet despite the calm, Jacob's instincts whispered something else. The storm wasn't over. It was only pausing. One morning, with the sky glowing pink and brittle, a rider approached from the north. He was wrapped in furs, hat low, scarf up. The horse was lathered in sweat despite the cold. Wren spotted him first through the spyglass. Stranger. Coming hard. Jacob stepped onto the porch, rifle resting in the crook of his arm. Isaac joined him. Doesn't look military. Doesn't look local either. The rider dismounted stiffly. A courier bag hung from his shoulder. He moved like someone used to long rides, but favoring a limp. "You Ransom?" he asked. Jacob nodded. The man handed him a sealed letter. Message. Came from Denver. Urgent. Said it concerns your wife. Muriel stepped out behind them. Hands dusted in flour. Jacob opened the letter slowly. The paper inside was fine, expensive. The handwriting looped and confident. To Mr. Jacob Ransom. It has come to our attention that certain land proceedings were filed using documents which, while persuasive, were never meant to reach a court of law. These papers were previously sealed by agreement between several influential parties, and their exposure places multiple reputations and investments at risk. We offer a final proposal. Relinquish claim to the northern ridge of Dry Creek. In exchange, you will receive $40,000 in gold, 2 ranch parcels west of Ogallala, and guaranteed non-interference for the remainder of your holdings. Failure to respond within 7 days will be interpreted as a declaration of hostility. Yours, A. Marston. Jacob. Read the letter twice. Marston, Isaac said, frowning. That's the banker behind the Durant Syndicate. Muriel's jaw clenched. And now they're calling it war. The family council met that night. The fire cracked in the hearth. Wren sat cross-legged, cleaning her rifle. Isaac smoked his pipe. Jacob read the letter aloud again. Wren whistled. That's more than we're worth on paper. Which means Dry Creek's worth even more to them, Isaac said. They want that ridge, Jacob murmured. The mineral rights. The rail survey path. They don't want land, Muriel said. They want obedience. Jacob looked around. We're not taking the offer. No, Muriel said. We're not. The trap came on the 3rd snow. Jacob and Isaac were riding fence lines when they saw it. Tracks. Wagon ruts where none should be. Leading toward the north ridge past the boundary marker. They followed them cautiously. Rifles ready. The tracks ended at a burned-out pine stump. Buried beneath the snow were metal wires. Trip lines. Jacob dismounted, brushed the snow aside, and froze. Mines, he whispered. Isaac's eyes widened. They laid traps in our pasture. Jacob stood, jaw tight. That's not pressure wire. That's rigged to movement, to cattle, to children. They disarmed what they could, marking the rest with flags. Jacob returned to the ranch silent, his face a mask. This is war, he said. Muriel nodded. Then we defend. The blizzard hit that night. It rolled down from the mountains like a wave, thick, violent, white. The world vanished. Sound died. Even the dogs went quiet. And in that silence, they came. 5 men, dark coats, covered faces. 2 on horseback. 3 on foot. They came to burn the barn. But Wren was waiting. The first shot rang out before the torch hit hay. 1 man dropped. Another fired back blindly, hitting nothing but snow. Jacob leapt from the porch with Isaac behind him. Muriel threw opened the window and fired once, striking the lead horse, which reared and sent its rider tumbling. It was chaos. Muffled gunfire, screams, flames licking the side of the barn. Snow melting from heat and blood. Jacob tackled a man in the snow. Rifle gone, fist swinging. Isaac pulled a knife from his boot and ended another with a quiet grunt. Wren reloaded and shot the last man as he reached for the gate. Then silence. Smoke curled from the barn. They put the fire out with snow, water, and grit. When the sun rose, the field was scorched, the snow blackened. 5 bodies. No names, no papers. But on one coat was stitched the initials. ETM. The law arrived 2 days later. Sheriff Ellis stood in the yard, looking at the wreckage. You have every right to defend this place, he said. But this is going to start something. Jacob looked him in the eye. It already has. Ellis nodded slowly. Then you'd better be ready. We are, Muriel said. That week, the townsfolk came. The Carters, the Hennings, the Braddocks. One by one, wagons pulled into Dry Creek. We heard what happened, Mama Carter said. We're not letting them take this. Jacob stared at the crowd. You sure? A man stepped forward. You taught my daughter math. She's 9, knows more than I do. Another said, you mended my wife's ankle. Didn't charge a thing. Another, you built this school. That makes you ours. Jacob swallowed hard. And then Morale stepped onto the porch. She raised her voice. This is Dry Creek, not a business deal, not a paper title. This land is watered by our sweat, planted with our dead. If they want it, they can come. But we won't go quietly. Cheers rose. Hands lifted. Rifles gleamed, and somewhere above them, a hawk cried over a land that was waking up to its own power. End of Part 13. In Part 14, the storm breaks wide open. A courtroom standoff, a jailbreak in the blizzard, and one final ultimatum that pushes Dry Creek to its edge. Subscribe now. The fire they started has found its fuel, and the people of Dry Creek are just getting warmed up. Part 14 of They Laughed When Rancher Bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. Dry Creek was no longer just a ranch. It had become something else, a line in the sand, a place people were willing to fight for. And as the first real thaw of spring touched the edges of the snowpack, the war turned from fields and rifles to courthouses and signatures. Jacob and Morale rode into Cheyenne with Ren and Isaac, arriving outside the federal court building 2 hours before the hearing. There, behind sandstone walls and guarded doors, would begin the final battle for Dry Creek's northern ridge, and perhaps for everything they'd built. Inside the courtroom, the benches were filled. Newspapers had picked up the story. A burned ranch, a reformed mail-order bride, and a mysterious banker syndicate with eyes on Wyoming territory. Reporters whispered, inked lines already half-formed in their minds. On one side of the gallery sat the people of Dry Creek, school teachers, homesteaders, small ranchers. On the other, lawyers in silk ties, their papers wrapped in red ribbon. At the front, a federal judge named Barkley presided, square-jawed and cold-eyed. The bailiff called Case 178, Ransom versus the Marston Land Consortium. Jacob and Morale stood on the opposite bench. A man in a navy coat rose. Elijah Thomas Marston, representing the consortium. He was tall, lean, and smooth. His eyes scanned Jacob like a vulture measuring distance to meet. The trial began. Marston moved first, presenting maps and surveys dating back 50 years. This ridge was declared unsettled in 1858, reassigned to the Crown Holding Company in 1861. Purchased by the Durant Consortium in 1870. All legal, all recorded. The ransom's claim rests on an obscure railroad grant never ratified federally. He smiled, soft and slow. But we understand sentiment. We're here to resolve this amicably. Morale whispered to Jacob, that means bribe or eviction. Jacob nodded. I know. Their turn came. Morale rose. She walked slowly to the front, holding the rolled parchment Isaac had uncovered. Her voice carried, this is the original rail grant issued by the Territorial Commission of Wyoming. It shows Dry Creek's ridge granted to a settler co-op, including my grandfather. She unrolled it. The judge leaned forward. But more than documents, she continued. This is about what's just. These people, my students, our neighbors built Dry Creek. It's not speculation to them. It's home. Marston rose. Your Honor, this woman is not an attorney. She's my wife, Jacob said, standing. And everything she said is truth. The judge nodded. Continue. Isaac testified next, detailing the forgery, the stolen maps, the trail of false claims. Marston paled as Isaac held up a page signed by L. Durant, the same alias Burke Delroy had used. And then, finally, Jacob took the stand. He spoke plainly about burying men during the war, about building fence posts one at a time, about watching a woman walk into a scorched barn and still find a way to smile. I don't care what's under that ridge, he finished. We'll die before we give it up. There was silence. Then Judge Barkley leaned back. I will review the materials. Return tomorrow for the ruling. That night, Marston made his final move. He bribed the jailer. Burke Delroy, arrested weeks earlier in connection to the barn fire, was released quietly. No record, no trace, but he didn't flee. Instead, he went to the Cheyenne telegraph station. And sent a single line. Initiate extraction. Nightfall. Back in Dry Creek, the townsfolk waited. The school was closed. Guards rotated hourly. Children slept in the big house. And under the cover of dusk, 6 riders in black approached the ranch from the canyon's edge. They wore no markings. They didn't speak, but Wren spotted them from the tower. They're back, she said, cocking her rifle. The call went out. Positions. The townsfolk scrambled. Women took the children into the cellar. Isaac armed the south flank. Jacob rode out to meet the lead rider. Turn back, he shouted. This ends tonight. The lead rider removed his hat. It was Delroy. I agree, he said. Let's finish this. He drew first, but Jacob was faster. Delroy's gun flew from his hand. He cursed and lunged. They grappled in the snow, fists flying, breath white in the air. Then came the explosion. One of the riders had rigged dynamite to the outer fence. It blew in a thunderous roar, sending splinters and smoke into the sky. Chaos. But Dry Creek was ready. Wren shot one rider from the tower. Isaac felled another with a blade to the throat. The townsfolk fought like wolves, tight, relentless. And in the barn, Morale grabbed a rifle and shot out the final lantern, plunging the field into black. Gunshots echoed. Men screamed. And then, just as suddenly, it ended. 5 bodies lay still. Delroy knelt in the snow, hands bound. Jacob wiped blood from his face. It's done. The next day, the judge called court to order. He looked tired. I received word of an attempted raid on Dry Creek, he said. Morale nodded. We defended ourselves. Was Mr. Delroy involved? Jacob tossed a telegram onto the judge's bench. Intercepted this from the telegraph office. The judge read it. His jaw tightened. Mr. Marston, do you deny authorizing these actions? Marston rose, smirking. I deny nothing, but I accept the consequences. Then hear this, the judge said. The ransom's claim is upheld. The northern ridge belongs to Dry Creek by law, by right, and by witness. Cheers erupted. Morale's eyes filled. Jacob reached for her hand. Later that week, as they rode home, Jacob turned in the saddle. Think they'll try again? Morale smiled faintly. They already lost. How? Because they thought we'd break. Jacob looked out over the valley, still scarred. Still healing, but home. End of part 14. One final part remains. In part 15, a wedding. A secret. Buried in the orchard. And the letter Morale never meant for anyone to read. Subscribe now. Because before the sun sets, Dry Creek will see its final chapter written in ink, in blood, and in love. Part 15 of They Laughed When Rancher Bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride. Then saw her face. The snow was gone by the time the first flowers bloomed in the orchard. Apple blossoms fluttered like silk, flags across the southern grove. And the scent of lilac drifted through Dry Creek like a gentle echo from somewhere softer, slower. It had been 5 weeks since the court's ruling. 5 weeks since the raid. 5 weeks since Dry Creek became more than just a patch of stubble land. It had become legend. The townsfolk insisted on a celebration. Morale resisted at first. We're not royalty, she said, folding laundry. You're something better, Mama Carter replied. You're a symbol. They planned it in secret. The children rehearsed a play about the lady who taught wolves to read, full of stick horses and misquoted poetry. The Hennings offered barrels of cider. Wren carved wooden figurines, one for each child. Isaac built a new bell tower, and one morning, as Morale stepped into the schoolhouse, Jacob was waiting with a ring made from forged silver and an inscription carved along the inside. To my storm. My stillness, my home. I married you once, he said. Let's do it again, this time with the whole town watching. She cried, of course. Then slapped his chest and whispered, you're a fool. And he kissed her in front of 30 children and a laughing Mama Carter. The wedding was held in the orchard, beneath the tree where Mirail had once collapsed after carrying water to save the west field. Now, lanterns hung from the branches. Wildflowers lined the rows. Jacob wore his old cavalry coat, cleaned and pressed. Mirail wore a blue dress stitched by the town's seamstress, lace at the sleeves, a ribbon in her hair. Isaac officiated, because of course he did. Wren sang. It was off-key but from the heart, and when they kissed again, Jacob whispered, you saved me. Mirail replied, you made me brave. That night the sky burned with stars. They danced. They drank. Children fell asleep on blankets under apple trees. Old enemies leaned against the barn and admitted they'd been wrong. The fire cracked. Fiddles played. And Mirail, sometime past midnight, walked barefoot into the orchard and found the box. It had been buried beneath the roots of the oldest tree. A rusted tin, small lock. She remembered it, years ago before. The fire before the trial. She had written a letter. To herself. She'd buried it the day she first taught class. With trembling hands, she opened it. The paper was brittle. The ink faded. But the words remained. To the woman I hope to become. If you're reading this, you stayed. And if you stayed, you probably hurt. Maybe you cried. Maybe you ran once or twice. Maybe someone told you that you were too old, too broken, too late, but you planted something. And you let people see it. You opened your hands when it was easier to keep them closed. You are not what they called you. Not just a bride, not just a widow, not just a survivor. You're a teacher, a fighter, a root. Don't forget who you were when you arrived. Don't forget who you dared to become. Love. Always my R-E-I-L-L-E. She folded the letter, hands trembling. A twig snapped behind her. Jacob stood there, eyes soft. You all right? She nodded, just remembering. He took her hand. We're still here, he said. Yes, she whispered, and we're not done. Dry Creek didn't vanish. It didn't fade into dust and myth. Like so many other places. It grew. The school added 2 more benches. The orchard tripled. The cattle thrived. Wren took over the school when Mirail stepped back. Isaac married the town baker. Jacob's hair turned silver. And every year, on the first snow, Mirail would open her old tin box and read the letter aloud to the children who hadn't yet learned what fighting for something really meant. She read it, slowly. Deliberately. And when she finished, she'd close the box, press it to her chest, and say, this is your home if you're brave enough to hold it. Years later, when Mirail was gone and Jacob followed, they buried them beneath that same apple tree. Together. And on the stone, the townsfolk carved the words she'd once written in fading ink. Not just a bride, not just a widow, not just a survivor. She was the root. End of part 15. And the final chapter of They Laughed When Rancher bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. Thank you for riding with us to the end. If this story stirred something, and you share it, remember it, and find your own Dry Creek wherever you stand. Subscribe for more stories where courage isn't always loud, but it's always heard. The late summer sky over Dry Creek Ranch was a washed-out blue, so pale and brittle it threatened to crack under the weight of the heat. Jacob Ransom stood at the edge of the newly plowed field, the turned-over earth like dark leather. The young Sorrel Mare nickered at his side, restless. For 2 weeks the well had dropped a foot each dawn. The orchard spring slowed to a trickle, and the riverbed farther downstream had begun to show bare stone. Mirail Dumas Ransom delivered a basket of newly gathered beans and squash, her forehead creased with worry as she approached. The sun baked her hair into a halo of sweat. Children's laughter drifted from the school cabin, where Wren Henderson taught reading her own auburn hair pinned beneath a worn sun hat. Her voice firm against the stifling air. Doc Jacob looked up. "You got news?" She shook her head. "Nothing. Changes on the maps. The city council won't refill the water trust. They say we need an import line from the reservoir which they control." He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the hot wind press against his skin like a fist. When he opened them, his gaze drifted back to the far ridge where shadows pooled under the scrub oaks. "We'll find water." Mireille set the basket down, wiping her hands on her skirt. "We've tried every spring, every seam in the rock. Nothing." A tremor passed through Jacob's jaw. "Then we'll dig deeper." That evening, as twilight bled into the horizon, Isaac Ransom rode in from the north pasture, his horse thin but managed. He brought news of horses growing listless, cattle favoring the shade under trees that held no fruit. At the barn, he found Jacob and Mireille huddled over a weathered ledger. "I logged water use," Isaac said softly. "Last year's output, divided by the ranch's needs, shows we've got 2 weeks' supply provided there's no more heat wave. Not enough for school, not enough for chickens, barely enough for us." They exchanged glances, neither spoke. The ledger fell to the dirt. That night they gathered under the wide porch, joined by Wren, who had closed the school early. The moon was a sliver, the stars drowned in haze. "We could try the springs beyond the canyon," Wren offered. "I've seen them in maps, but they're 20 miles out, in territory not exactly friendly." Jacob's gaze locked on the horizon. "Lead the way at dawn." Mireille reached out, touched his arm. "You'll need more hands." Wren shook her head. "Just one. Let me come." Isaac volunteered silently, eyes never leaving Jacob's. They left before the sun. Each carried canteen and rations, dried meat, cornmeal, beans. Wren led on the Baymar. Isaac followed on the sorrel. Jacob brought up the rear on his stallion. Mireille stayed behind, returning to the homestead to marshal what remained, giving rations to the children, collecting buckets, and sending messages to neighbors for any spare ore. Buckets are old oxide-lined barrels that might hold water. The trail to the springs was rough rocky ledges, steep scree slopes, and yawning ravines that seemed designed to swallow horses whole. By mid-morning, they found the first spring, a trickle, barely more than seep through limestone. Wren filled her canteen. Isaac tested the water. Jacob drank, nodding. It was clean, cold. "Not enough," Jacob said. Wren patted her saddlebag. "There's more upstream." They climbed higher. At the next break, the spring widened barely 10 inches across, enough to fill 2 buckets an hour. Jacob set them on a lower ledge and marked the spot. They moved on. By late afternoon, they found the mother spring, a pool fed by underground aquifers, the water clear as glass, the ground mossy and moist despite the drought. A hidden head of life in a crater of dust. Wren's eyes glowed. "We can rig a pump here, hose it down." Isaac spread out the map Jacob carried. "We'll need 8-mile hose line. PVC, joints, pump, power. That's a project." Jacob knelt by the pool, scooping water to his lips. He tasted salvation. But the spring was at the bottom of a steep gulch with no easy route for machinery. He stood. "Then we haul it." Wren laughed low and sharp. "You'd do that, wouldn't you?" He met her gaze. "I'd do anything for this place." They rode back by moonlight, leading the Baymar laden with canisters of water, making plans for derricks, skid lifts, and water towers. Meanwhile, Mireille rallied the ranch hands at dawn, teaching them to build wooden cables from barrel hoops and sturdy beams scavenged from the old mill. Isaac organized teams to carve a sluice from the canyon edge, while Wren oversaw the construction of a makeshift wellhouse on the ridge. For 10 days they worked at fever pitch, rigging pulleys, hauling pipe sections uphill, sealing joints with pitch, wiring provisional generators powered by a vintage tractor engine. Dust and sweat coated every face. Children brought sandwiches and watered livestock under Mireille's supervision. Nightly, Jacob and Mireille would sit on the porch, hands entwined, listening to the distant churn of piston and pump. They rarely spoke, but in the silence was an unbreakable bond. Two lives fused by dust and faith. The morning they turned on the pump was crisp and calm. The generator roared under the clear sky. Wren held a lever. Jacob unclamped the hose. Isaac opened the valve. At first, a spurt of air hissed. Then, with a tremor of metal, water arced from the nozzle, cold, joyful, free. It struck the parched field and sizzled against the soil, hissing steam as it seeped. They cheered. Children ran down to splash in the rivulets. The dog leapt in circles. Even the late apple blossoms seemed to awaken, flicking petals in joy. Mireille laughed, arms outstretched. Jacob caught her in his embrace. Wren pumped the lever higher. Isaac hoisted a bucket into the line. For a moment, all was right in the world. But in that same hour, atop the north ridge, a lone figure watched from the cover of scrub oak. A rifle's bolt gleamed. A rival land agent sent by old enemies who refused to learn defeat. Aimed at the pumping station. A single shot rang out. Water splashed over the fields, and Dry Creek's latest miracle lay shattered in the dust once more. That night, Mireille stood by the well house, the hose severed, the generator smoking. She held a bucket of water, one precious bowl. Jacob found her there, rifle over his shoulder, lantern in hand. "She's back," she said quietly, "just like before." He set the lantern down, wrenching the pump handle off its mount. "Then, we'll build better." Mireille met his gaze, eyes fierce in the lamplight. "We always do." And somewhere beyond the orchard, steel-eyed watchers retreated into the dark, knowing Dry Creek would never break. End of Part 16. In Part 17, Dry Creek forges alliances beyond the ridge, a riverboat journey to Denver, a deal for new rails, and a shadow from Jacob's war days that comes calling at dusk. Subscribe and stay with us. The West may test our roots, but our branches reach skyward. Part 17 of They Laughed When Rancher bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. Denver shimmered like a mirage, steel and brick rising from dust and rail. The train hissed as it braked into the platform, the iron wheels screeching under the weight of passengers and freight. Jacob Ransom stepped down first, boots scraping wood, hat low. Mireille followed, dress hem lifted against the soot. Beside them, Isaac and Wren carried a crate between them, a sample from Dry Creek's new orchard harvest. Apples grown on stubborn land. They came not for sightseeing, but for a meeting that could rewrite the valley's future. Weeks had passed since the pump sabotage. The ranch limped along under reduced flow. Wren had patched the hose. Jacob had set traps along the ridgeline, and Isaac had led a small posse to scout out signs of the sniper. They found shell casings, no man, no trail. But the message was clear. Someone still wanted Dry Creek to fail. And so the Ransoms shifted focus. Mireille had written letters to the Rail Authority, the Agricultural Board, the Water Commissioner in Denver. One had replied, "Come, let us speak face to face." So now they stood outside a building on 10th Street, beneath a brass plaque, Western Union and Rail Coalition. Inside, a woman in a crisp navy suit greeted them. "You're early. Mr. Gallagher will see you momentarily. Please refreshments?" They declined. Minutes passed. Then came a voice, gravel thick. "Ransom?" Jacob turned. A man stood in the hallway, 60, maybe more. One eye clouded, the other sharp as glass. He wore suspenders and carried a cane carved with a crow. "I'm Gallagher," he said. "Come, let's talk like men and women who've bled into their soil." The office was spare. One desk, one map, one DECNTER. Gallagher motioned for them to sit. You came about your waterline. The sabotage, but that's not why I called you. Mireille raised a brow. No, I read your letters. But more than that, I read your town's story. Dry Creek stood its ground. That's rare. And rare things get my attention. He limped to the window. I'm building a spur. A rail off the central Denver line. It needs a terminal, a proof of concept. And it needs land where people won't run when capital comes knocking. Jacob folded his arms. You want Dry Creek. I want a partner with Dry Creek. Wren leaned forward. What kind of partnership? You provide right-of-way. We lay track. We install permanent water piping, a telegraph line, and promise station access twice weekly. Mireille's eyes narrowed. And in return? You. Supply us with produce, grazing access, and 1 vote on the expansion board. It was bold. It was dangerous. It was everything Dry Creek needed. Jacob looked to Mireille. We need time, she said. Gallagher nodded. You've got 48 hours. That night, they stayed at a boarding house near the rail yards. The city felt loud and sharp-edged. Mireille watched firelight flicker across the ceiling as Jacob paced. You trust him? She asked. I trust his ambition. That can be worse than greed. Jacob sat on the bed's edge. Dry Creek can't survive on mule carts and buckets forever. This deal could open markets, bring medicine, books, a future. Mireille nodded slowly. Or it could open doors to every man who ever tried to. Burn us down. In the silence that followed, a knock came at the door. Jacob opened it, hand on his revolver. But it wasn't danger. It was a face he hadn't seen in 20 years. Man in a patched cavalry coat. Hello, Ransom. Jacob blinked. Corwin? The man stepped in, gray in his beard. Scar across his cheek. I heard your name on the wind, he said. Came to settle something. Corwin had ridden with Jacob in the war. The same unit. The same fires. They'd parted badly after a failed mission and a night of blood. He now pulled out a file. You need to know something. About Gallagher, and about the man behind your sniper. He spread documents on the bed, land contracts, shipping ledgers. One photo, a blurred image of a man boarding the train, holding a long rifle. His name's Trask. Worked as an enforcer for Marston back in the Dakota days. Now he's free roaming. Paid to disrupt rail deals Gallagher gets close to. I believe he was hired again, only this time, he's not loyal to Marston or Gallagher. He's loyal to Coin. Jacob clenched his fists. So he sabotaged us to drive us to Gallagher? Or away from Gallagher? Either way, he's back. Mireille looked at the photo. And he's coming for us. Corwin tapped the photo. Unless you go to him first. They met Gallagher the next day with new clarity. We'll take your deal, Jacob said. With conditions. Gallagher smirked. Go on. We oversee construction. We maintain autonomy. And you help us find Trask. Gallagher's smile faded. I know the name. Then help us end him. Gallagher paused. Done. They returned to Dry Creek with contracts, surveyors, and a telegram for the townsfolk to gather. At the town hall, once a barn. Now a meeting place. Mireille stood before the crowd. We have a chance, she said. To move forward, but not alone, with eyes open. With our guard up, with each other. Jacob added, the past hasn't forgotten us, so we won't forget it either. But we're not building walls anymore. We're building doors. The town voted. Unanimous. The spur would come, and Dry Creek would rise higher still. That night, on the edge of town, a lone figure lit a match in a pine grove. He wore a black duster. A long rifle rested against his knee. He watched the lanterns flicker in the valley below. Then turned toward the canyon. And disappeared. End of Part 17. In Part 18, track laying begins. A rider goes missing, and a storm descends over the valley, carrying with it the echo of an ambush long buried in Jacob's soul. Subscribe and saddle up. Dry Creek's roots have grown, but something dark has followed them home. Part 18 of They Laughed When Rancher Bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. The first iron rail touched Dry Creek soil at dawn. Children stood barefoot in the grass, watching men drive spikes with sledgehammers. Sparks flew, horses shifted nervously. The low whistle of the work engine echoed through the valley. For the first time since the Ransoms arrived, progress had a sound, and it wasn't gunfire or grief. Jacob Ransom stood beside Isaac, watching a crane lower the switch plate near the edge of the south orchard. "When I was young," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd see steel laid here. I thought this land was where people came to disappear." Isaac nodded. "Now it's where people come to be found." Over the next 2 weeks, Dry Creek became a rail town in the making. Survey crews staked out the terminal near the old barn. Morale supervised a team replanking the school's porch to serve as a provisional telegraph station. Wren drafted lists of supplies for the incoming market: carts, books, ink, dried peaches, salt. Gallagher's engineers worked side by side with townsfolk sharing meals. Sleeping in the haylofts. Suspicion gave way to cooperation. Until the storm came. It started with windlong, dry gusts that stripped leaves from the cottonwoods. Skies turned a chalky gray. Morale felt it in her knees. Wren tied her hair down with a scarf. Isaac loaded grain into the cellar. Then, 2 hours before dusk, a rider failed to return. Benji Thomason, 15, sent to the North Ridge with water. Buckets for the lineman. He never came back. By the time Jacob mounted his horse, the wind howled like a banshee across the prairie. He took Isaac and Wren. Morale stayed behind with a rifle and a lantern, posting lookouts. They found the first sign of trouble at the ridge. One overturned bucket. Horse tracks leading west, then nothing. Wren dismounted. No blood, no drag. Marks. Isaac squatted low, pointing to indentations. Boot prints. Not Benji's, too wide, heavy. Jacob scanned the horizon. Then he saw it. A flash of metal on the far slope. A man. Watching. The figure moved, disappeared. Trask. Jacob said under his breath. They followed. The trail led into the canyon's narrow switchbacks, wind-carved arches. It was territory Jacob knew well. It was where he had once led a retreat during the war. A night of ambushes. A field soaked in blood. A friend who died screaming. Now it was home to ghosts. And Trask. They reached a shallow cave after dark. Isaac lit a torch. Wren signaled silence. They entered slowly. Benji was there, tied to a post. Gagged, unharmed, but they'd been expected. Click echoed in the cave. A trap snapped shut. The roof gave way. Jacob shoved Wren and Isaac aside as rocks fell. Dust blinded them. Then came the gunfire. Trask stood above the cave entrance. Rifle aimed. He didn't shoot to kill. He shot to wound, and Jacob took the bullet in the side. Wren returned fire, forcing Trask to retreat. Isaac dragged Jacob behind cover. Blood soaked his shirt. His breathing turned shallow. Pressure! Wren shouted. Isaac tore off his belt, cinched the wound. Benji moaned behind them. Jacob gritted his teeth. "Get the boy. Leave me." "Not a chance," Isaac growled. Wren loaded another round. "We hold until morning. Then we move." Back at Dry Creek, Mireille waited through the storm. She didn't sleep, didn't eat, just stared into the dark until shapes returned. At dawn, she saw 3 figures on the ridge. She ran. They reached the porch just as Jacob collapsed. Mireille caught him. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Wren and Isaac lowered him to the ground. "He's alive," Wren said. "But he needs a doctor." Mireille stood. "Then bring the train." Gallagher's men worked fast. The terminal wasn't complete, but the tracks could carry a car. They wired Denver. By nightfall, the emergency rail car arrived with a medic on board. Jacob was loaded in. Mireille rode with him. In Denver, the doctor saved his life. Just barely, 2 weeks of fever. Morale never left his side. When he woke, he reached for her hand and said only, "Home?" She nodded. Soon. Back in Dry Creek, Trask vanished again. But this time, he left something behind. A bullet carved with initials "Gr. Jacob Ransoms." Morale held it in her palm. Eyes steeled. She didn't cry, she didn't curse. She simply said, "He wants a war." Isaac nodded. "Then we'll give him one." The valley had changed. The railroad was nearly complete. Markets had begun trickling in. Salt, flour, paper, an organ for the church. But now, behind every good thing, lay the shadow of Trask. And one unfinished score. End of Part 18. In Part 19. The wedding Jacob almost missed. A final trap set at midnight. And the one truth Morale discovers that could end everything, including Dry Creek itself. Subscribe for the next chapter. Because every root has its price, and every piece has its reckoning. Part 19 of They Laughed When Rancher bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. Jacob Ransom returned home on a quiet morning, too weak to ride, too stubborn to rest. The rail had made it to Dry Creek, its whistle now a part of daily life. Children raced beside it as it pulled in from Denver, and townsfolk tipped hats when the crew stepped down. But that day, it wasn't freight or news that arrived. It was the man who'd bled for this land and the woman who had kept him breathing. Morale helped Jacob from the railcar, his arms slung over her shoulder. He limped slow, lips tight against the pain. Isaac met them at the ramp. Wren was waiting. Too, face unreadable. "Welcome home," Isaac said softly. Jacob managed a half smile. Home never looked so needed. A week passed. Jacob slept most days, mending in the front room while Morale cooked or tended the garden. Wren sat with him some afternoons, reading from the old copy of Pilgrim's Progress or the new Gazette that now came in by train. Each day brought news of expanding settlements, cattle contracts, railroad expansion, but still no sign of Trask. Until one evening, Wren came in breathless. "He was seen," she said. Near Copper Hill, 2 riders reported a man fitting his description, camping alone, scouting. Jacob tried to rise. Morale placed a firm hand on his chest. "No, not yet." He gritted his teeth. "We can't wait." She didn't move her hand. "You'll wait, or you'll bury me first." His eyes softened. He lay back. That night, Morale sat alone in the orchard with an old letter she hadn't read in years. One from her sister in France, sent long before. Morale answered Jacob's call for a bride. In it, her sister had written, "You always chase storms. But maybe one day, a storm will chase you. Be ready to stop running." Morale folded the letter. The storm had arrived, and she was done running. The next morning, Morale went to Isaac. "Help me set a trap," she said. He nodded. "What do you need?" "An abandoned cabin, a rider, and a reason for Trask too." "Come close." They chose the old Whitmore cabin burned out during the range wars. They sent a false telegram through the new line, hinting at Gallagher transporting land deeds under escort. Wren posed as the courier. The word was meant to spread too. Reach ears that paid well for ambushes. Within days, it worked. A scout reported a rider circling the cabin. 2 nights in a row. Rifle in hand, watching. Trask. The trap was set. Jacob insisted on coming. "I'll stay hidden," he said. "But I won't let you face him alone." Morale didn't argue. She saw the fire in his eyes. He would have followed her with one leg or no legs at all. The night of the trap, the wind blew steady. Wren rode out with a fake satchel. Disappeared inside the cabin. Isaac waited in the trees. Jacob and Morale took position in the root cellar beneath the floor. They waited. At midnight, the door creaked. A boot stepped. Then another. Wren's voice calm, measured. "You sure you want that rifle pointed?" A pause, then Trask's drawl. Never been more sure of anything. Jacob tensed. Morale touched his hand. They heard Wren shift. Then I guess you know what happens next. 2 shots rang out. Then silence. Jacob burst from the cellar. Trask lay on the ground, arm bleeding. Gun gone. Wren held her pistol steady. I shot his rifle arm, she said. Morale stepped forward. Trask looked up at her. Well, he muttered. Took you long enough. Morale knelt beside him. You're not the first man who thought this land would fold, but you might be the last. He laughed, then coughed blood. You got spirit, I'll give you that. Morale searched his coat. She found papers. And among them contracts, deeds, maps. But not from Gallagher, from someone else. Name neither she nor Jacob expected. James Ransom. Jacob stared. My father's name. Morale unfolded the map. It showed Dry Creek and a secondary title claim from 30 years prior. He tried to sell this land to the railway before the war, Jacob said slowly. It was rejected. I thought it was buried. Morale pointed to the bottom. A clause. Claim valid if unchallenged by blood heir within 40 years. Jacob's hands trembled. He never filed the death notice. So Gallagher's enemy found this, hired Trask to disrupt us, and plans to claim the land himself. Wren looked up. Unless we file proof, now. They rode that night. Jacob couldn't mount, so Isaac drove the wagon. Wren held the deed. Morale gripped the revolver. At the rail terminal, the train was ready. The conductor had orders, priority dispatch. Legal counsel waiting in Denver. They made it by dawn. Filed the death certificate. Stamped the seal. The claim was locked. Dry Creek was theirs. Back in town, a wedding awaited. Benji Thomason's parents were renewing vows. The whole town gathered. Jacob leaned on a cane, Morale on his arm. Children tossed petals. The wind was soft. As the couple kissed. The crowd cheered. Morale whispered, no more battles. Jacob smiled. Only harvests. That night, they stood on the porch. Mireel. E held the old letter again. You still chasing storms? Jacob asked. She shook her head. Not anymore. Then she looked west, where rain clouds gathered in the distance, dark but distant. We weathered them all. He kissed her hair, and we built something that holds. End of part 19. In the final chapter, the legacy sealed, the final school built, and a final message left behind for a future not yet born. Subscribe for the closing chapter. Because some stories end not in thunder, but in the roots they leave behind. Part 20 of They Laughed when Rancher bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. Spring came late that year. It lingered at the edge of winter like a hesitant guest, unsure whether it was welcome in a valley still scorched by scars and shadow. But when it came whole warm rains, gold blooms in the gullies, birdsong in the rafters of the old barn-turned schoolhouse. The creek sang louder. The orchard thickened with promise. Dry Creek had not only survived it, had grown. And at the heart of it all stood Morale Ransom. She rose early each morning, long before the rooster crowed, and walked the rows with a ledger under one arm and a straw hat pulled low. Her back ached now, and her eyes weren't what they once were, but her will had never been sharper. She'd been the thread that held the ranch together, and now, as it evolved into a town worth marking on a map, she remained its cornerstone. Jacob healed, slowly. He moved with a limp, but refused a cane. The rifle that once never left his side now sat above the mantel, retired. With honor. He took to teaching at the schoolhouse once a week, history, sometimes math, though he leaned heavily on Wren for the latter. The children liked his war stories, even if he left out the worst parts. Always end with the part where the wagon doesn't tip. He'd say with a wink, the town was different now. The rail came twice a week, delivering parcels, newsprint. Rare guests. Gallagher visited once, shook hands, and told Jacob he'd seen worse turn into cities. "You've got grit," he said, "and land worth betting on." Mireille turned the old bunkhouse into a mercantile. She hired 2 young girls from the settlement beyond the ridge to help. Isaac built shelves. Wren managed the books. Benji Thomason apprenticed with the blacksmith. He whistled while he worked, though he never again rode north alone. The orchard bore its first full harvest that year, apples mostly. Plums too. Mireille organized a town celebration, pies, cider, dancing in the barn. Even Gallagher's engineer stayed for a song. On the first Sunday of summer, the schoolhouse opened its second wing. New desks. More children. And on the wall, a plaque, in honor of those who stayed when it was easier to run. Wren unveiled it during a quiet morning. Jacob stood by, silent, hand on Mireille's shoulder. She said nothing, but the way she touched the wood told everyone all they needed. One afternoon, while cleaning the back office of the mercantile, Mireille found a bundle of papers wrapped in old oilcloth. She opened it slowly. Letters, dozens, all addressed to Jacob, never mailed. Written by James Ransom, Jacob's father. Each letter told a piece of the past. Failed land deals, regrets over war, warnings about Gallagher's world. And one final page, never signed. "Mireille, if you're reading this, it means the land has chosen you, more than blood, more than grit. You kept what I couldn't. You turned a last chance into something good. Don't let anyone shame you for the price you paid to get here. You were never a gamble. You were the answer." She read it twice, then tucked it in her apron. That night, she handed it to Jacob on the porch. He didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it was only, "I knew he regretted. I just never thought he'd write it down." Mireille said, "He was right about one thing." Jacob looked at her. "You were the answer," she said. Years passed. Dry Creek grew. The telegraph line turned to telephone. The train made daily stops. Children who once ran barefoot now ran businesses. The orchard expanded. The school built a library. Mireille kept walking those rows every morning. Until one spring, she didn't. She passed in her sleep, the ledger still open on her knitstand. The town mourned. Jacob wore black for a month, then brown, then his old gray coat, but he never wore grief the way he once wore fury. He planted a tree in her honor center of the orchard, a French pear, her favorite. He carved her name into the trunk with a pocket knife. Mireille, rooted here forever. The last pages of the story were not written in gunpowder or blood, but in ink, ledger. Blossom. Dry Creek never made the front page of the Denver Gazette, but it didn't need to. Its children told its story, its fields sang it, and its roots, deep and old, held fast against all things that passed overhead. In the schoolhouse attic, one child found a letter one day, wrapped in wax cloth, sealed with twine. She brought it to the librarian. They opened it together. It read, "To the ones who come after, we weren't perfect. We weren't even always right, but we stood. When the dust rose, when the water dried, when the bullets flew, we stood. And we made something worth leaving behind. If you're holding this, it means you're part of it now. This land, this story, this fight to make something live. And that fight is yours to carry, not because it's easy, but because it's real." Signed, M. At the end of part 20, and the final chapter of They Laughed When Rancher bought the 45-year-old mail-order bride, then saw her face. Thank you for riding with us through every rail laid, every letter written, every storm survived. Subscribe for the next story, because in the West, there's always one more tale to tell.